pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And I will take a motion to go into an open session of our budget committee. Mrs. Nardawillo, I'll take a second. Mrs. Pangburn, all in favor? Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to remind you that Mrs. Nardawillo is the chair of our budget committee, and Ms. Skills is going to start us out tonight.
I am. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Our topic is instructional technology. For those of you who are watching the live stream, if you have any questions during the presentation, please email communications@ncolony.org. We are monitoring that throughout the presentation, and we will be able to answer your questions. I would be remiss if I didn't start with mission-focused budgeting, because Mr. Core starts every presentation. It grounds all of our decisions, it grounds everything we do, so that we can make sure we're doing the best to serve our students and our community well. So the first part is that we are committed to creating an environment that supports the whole student. So it is growth academically, but it is also social and emotional growth. And the second part is that we are committed to supporting our teachers and our community members so that we can grow together and always be learning, so that tomorrow we're better than we were today and we're better the next day. And we are committed to ongoing improvement. We have 3 pillars that guide our work. The first is academic excellence, that is thinking about, especially in the pandemic, any areas where continuity of learning may have been disrupted. Our second pillar is equity, to make sure that we are avoiding opportunity gaps. You often hear about achievement gaps. We want to look at where are the gaps and opportunities that may actually get to achievement gaps afterward. And social emotional health. Obviously, that was the one at the heart of the pandemic. Understanding our students' social emotional well-being is every bit as important as their academic well-being. And something we learned during the pandemic, we really thought about instructional technology as really being about the academic pillar. And the pandemic certainly showed us that instructional technology, the equity pillar for who did have access, who didn't have access to Wi-Fi at home, and the work that our teams did to close those gaps. And then social emotional health. Obviously, for many of us, when we were locked down during the pandemic, it was technology that kept us connected, and that is certainly true of our students and their friends. So tonight you'll hear from Julie Scriven, our Director of Technology, as we move forward and hopefully get back to closer to normal. We will ask these questions of ourselves throughout this entire budget process. So how are we using not just the lessons of the pandemic, but things we've been seeing this year, so that we continue to build in a forward-focused way academically? How will we continue to ensure that all of our learners have equal access to either opportunities or the support that they need? And how are we sure that we're delivering the right supports to all of our students? And then the big one that gets 2 sub-bullets, because it's what we're all talking about, people's social emotional health. So how do we make sure our school buildings feel safe and supportive and fully inclusive, that all students feel like they belong and they are part of it? And then how do we continue to add joy back into the school day? We've been through 2 very difficult and challenging years. How do we use the magic of discovery and the joy of learning to make schools a place where students can talk to one another, enjoy each other's company, while also learning and advancing their education? So I'm going to turn it over to Julie, and she has much to share with you. Oh, thank you. There you are.
Okay, well, welcome to Tech Night. Historically, this presentation tends to run a little bit longer than the others. I apologize. I think that's why we're in our own special night. I will try and make this as short as I can. We'll try and stay at kind of a high level on most of the topics, but if you have questions or want to deep dive into the weeds, I'm more than happy to do that. If we have any deep questions on networking and things we're purchasing from that side, Keith Sprague is also here. He's going to help me out. And I guess without any further ado, I'm going to start going forward. We're going to start with a department overview, kind of the tech landscape in our department. Then we'll talk about instructional hardware, some network hardware, some non-public hardware, a lot of hardware tonight, some IT equipment, some security cameras, and the last bit we're going to do a really, really quick, I promise, brief overview of the Smart School Project. So we'll start with our department. I'm Julie, I'm the Director of Technology. Keith Sprague is our network administrator. He deals with all of our switches, the Wi-Fi, our firewall. We have Tom Mean, who's a senior network and systems technician. He deals mostly with phones and cameras and physical networking and cabling. We have Amanda Jewell, who's a network and systems technician. She deals a lot with our software subscriptions, the rostering of kids into them, the EdLaw, 2D agreements, and a lot of support in our elementary, middle school, and high school. We have Brian Van Alstyne, who is a specialist in Windows. He does most of the controls for all of our Windows PCs across the district, as well as our servers. We have Ryan Moore, who is one of our floating techs. He is very specialized into Chrome and anything to do with Chromebooks, filtering, all sorts of things. He also can do any of the other support across the buildings. And as you might have seen, he is our live streamer tonight and has been here multiple nights. So thank you very, very much, Ryan, for coming all these evenings for this. Last in that group, we have Michael Miniatis. He is actually the tech in this building here, supporting all of our middle school students. We just had someone leave at the high school who was our full-time tech at the high school, Mr. Brandon Johnson, and we'll be replacing him. And we have 6 building level computer aides at our elementary schools. They provide our first tier support at all of our elementaries. So just a little bit, and I promise we won't go too deep into the stats, but I just kind of want to give people an overview. And since we've been showing basically the same slide over the years, we have kind of a good history of data to look at. So I just want to show people a couple key things to note about the number of devices we have. First of all, if you look at the bottom, the total number of devices that we have every year has been going up. It just continues, it will continue to go up every year. A couple things to notice on our Chromebooks, you'll notice they're kind of leveling off. Last year we got 1-to-1 in K through 12, and now that we're there, that number should stay about the same. The PCs also kind of leveling off. We had a little bit of a bump last year because of COVID. We had a lot of long-term subs, permanent subs, a lot of nurses, people that we normally had been giving laptops to, and now probably forevermore will be. We had a few people that were moving from MacBook to PC, so you'll see some jumps in that as well. You'll see the MacBooks are going down, the iMacs are going down, the iPads are going down, but other things are taking their place. So we started off with phones generally in people's offices, but now we have phones in every single classroom. And over the construction project, we added security cameras to our junior high. We added security cameras for the new system into our high school, and that will hopefully continue to go up as we add security cameras in the other buildings. And then I also wanted to mention TVs. People think of TVs like at their home. Why would that be under technology? But our TVs are all smart TVs. They're all connected to the network. You can wirelessly project to all of them. They're really an IT device as well. And the last thing are LED touch panels. Those are the things, if we were back in the training room over at central office, instead of being up on a screen, I would have a screen where I could touch and move the slides forward on the screen. And we do have those in quite a few classrooms. So on to instructional hardware. So as I was saying before, we recently went 1-to-1 K through 2. So we also did a big change last summer. We collected thousands of Chromebooks so we could finally get ourselves to a replacement cycle where we replace your Chromebook in grades 1, 5, and 9 every year from here on forward. This is basically a very effective and, from a logistics perspective, very efficient way to do our replacement cycle. So when you're a first grader, you come, you get a Chromebook, you keep it for 4 years. In 5th grade, we take your old one back, we hand you a new one, and we do the same thing in 9th grade. For our kindergartners, you'll notice they're not up there. We don't let them keep it for the following year. Those are going to stay in the classroom, and we'll just replace that set that we have in the kindergarten rooms every 4 years. We also have a small number that we give to our staff. Those are mostly for educational aides, some of the custodians in different places. We have 60 of those that are up for replacement this cycle. And the very last line where it says ECF, those are a number of Chromebooks that we're actually using a grant from from COVID to replace. It's called the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and we'll be using that to offset 245 of them. And we've already applied for it, we've already been approved, we're just waiting, the model is changing, so we're waiting to buy them until a little later this spring. The next thing we're going to talk about is the replacement cycle. So these are things that we already have in all of our buildings. They've just come to their end of the life, and we're going to replace them. The first of those is a lab at the high school where they teach music notation. They're getting new laptops. There are 3 in the next lines are highlighted in green, and I just want to call special attention to those. Those are actually some art labs and an art cart that we planned replacing this year, but we're going to roll it forward and not replace it until next year. So when we talk about totals, I want people to kind of keep in the back of their mind that we're really kind of pushing 123,000 ahead to next year. Next one I want to talk about are 3 of our tech labs in the middle school here. They each have a cart that is due for replacement. Then at the library at the high school, so we're just going to kind of tell where we are. We're replacing 10 of their laptops. If anybody has been here long enough, they used to have 2 parts of laptops, but now that everybody has their own Chromebook, there's not really a need for that anymore. But they did request that we give them some laptops because kids tend to like to drop into the library and work on some of the work that they are doing in the labs when they can't get into them. So let's say you're in a business class and you want to work on your keyboarding, and you can't do it on your Chromebook, you'll be able to do it on the PC just like you would in the classroom in the library. So they'll have 10 of those that kids can check out and work on homework if they can't get into the labs. Next, we have a business lab. A201 is the keyboarding lab. If anybody is wondering why we're buying desktops, it's because in keyboarding they want a full-size keyboard and a full-size monitor. Next, we have 260 of our staff members who are due for a replacement laptop. We have really only 5 desktops. Those are instructional. They're usually in a kiosk or in a science classroom. We have 29 of our art teachers who are due for replacement laptops. Those are a little bit higher end to run some of the art apps, the Adobe Suite. We have 25 docking stations in various locations. And then we have, this ratio may change a little bit, but the dollar figure in the end will stay the same. We're looking at 91 TVs and 10 touch panels. That ratio may change, but they're basically projector replacements for our classroom. So we've been in a very kind of scheduled way going through and replacing all of the projectors that are out there with either a TV or a touchscreen. And the touchscreens in general end up in rooms for special ed or K through 2, or we have a few for math and science rooms at the high school. If anybody here in this building, we're already 100% TVs or touch panels in all of the rooms. Next, we have instructional hardware additions. So these are things that are new that people have requested in their departments. So at the junior high, we originally only had 2 art rooms. We now have 4, so they've requested a color printer in each of the new rooms. They also requested a printer for final projects that's a higher quality, does kind of a 13 by 19 photo of their work. They also are asking for iPads. These are for, actually, it's not up there, but the junior high and the senior high in their animation classes. They're finding that the iPads are more useful. They take stop motion video. They just use the iPads as a camera. There's a couple apps they really like, as well as in some of their art classes. So they're actually asking for 1 cart of iPads to be used with an Apple Pencil for drawing in their classes, as well as 1 small cart for animation in the middle school and 1 for animation at the high school. The next is a shared cart of laptops that will be used for the broadcasting club, 1 of the innovation spaces, and 1 of the CAD drawing classrooms. So they're going to share it. It's a cart of 30. Our CAD classrooms, that's actually a misnomer, it's the tech classrooms in their clean room would like desktops to connect to some of their big devices, their CNC router, some of the 3D printers for printing. They have also requested here at the junior high some desktops with webcams to install with their TVs in their conference rooms so that they can do video conferencing. If you have ever been on Zoom in a room with a bunch of other people on Zoom and gotten the feedback loops that are created, you'll understand why they would like just one camera and one mic for the room. There is a request for the new broadcasting club to have a broadcasting desktop. It's a little higher end, so that's a higher cost. And this is actually one of my favorite requests, and I don't think Brenda is here, but this was really, I love this. So she's requested iPads for the main offices, the nurse, and the registrar over at central office. And this is for a translation app, so imagine if you're a parent and you do not speak English and you need to come here and pick up your child from the nurse. Now the nurse has an iPad that she can use a translation app and actually talk back and forth about what is happening with your student. I thought it was a brilliant idea and I love it. I just experienced this at the DMV this week. Somebody next to me needed it and didn't have it, so it really, that one thing really speaks to me. The last line I wanted to call out, we were talking before about all those permanent subs, long-term subs, teacher force, and nurses. Believe it or not, there were 100 that we had to take care of. And at the time, we really didn't have PCs for them. In fact, we took PCs that were slated to be recycled, kind of pulled them from the trash. That was all we had. We could not use, it was the beginning of COVID, you couldn't get anything. And we handed them out. Well, now they are really ready to be recycled. So we're gonna need to buy 100 extra PC laptops. I'm gonna go through this slide real quick and then I'm gonna stop and see if anybody has any questions. So just to kind of summarize, we've got Chromebook 1-to-1, $508,725. The replacement cycle is $687,715. Department editions $184,932 for a grand total of $1,381. So I will say that in years past, we kind of hover in that 1 million to 1.1 million. This is more. Part of that is that we've got the carryover of those art computers that we're carrying over to next year. Part of that is that we're covering these subs. Part of that, honestly, is just that our Chromebooks now, what used to cost us $258 next year, same Chromebook, just one generation newer, is $315. That's unfortunately something you're gonna see throughout my budget, and there's not much I can do about it. Almost every software vendor and every hardware vendor has increased their prices, and we're stuck. There's really not much we can do about that. I'm gonna kind of pause here for a minute and just open it up for questions on instructional tech.
Thank you, Julia. Do we have questions from the board? Sandy?
I do. Well, why,
So sorry.
Why the rollover of $123,000 worth of equipment?
Well, because we weren't sure what we wanted to get. There was some debate about what it was, and once we got past the beginning of the year, it's kind of hard to switch them out in the middle. When we go to the new version, we're actually going to go to a new version of Adobe Creative Suite, and we're going to need to train up our staff on it. And people didn't feel exactly comfortable doing that in the middle of the year. So once we kind of passed that threshold where we didn't get them over the summer, we thought, you know what, if we can make it, we're gonna hold off till the end of the year. So not exactly ideal, and truthfully, at the beginning of last summer, we weren't sure what was gonna happen with COVID. We really weren't, and it just seemed like a safer idea if we could, Band-Aid them and hold along, that we would.
Okay, that makes sense. So with the 2022 budget, you'll be under budget by the 123?
Yep.
Okay, it's not like you're
No, I
something
didn't,
else.
basically, I wanted to make sure we didn't lose that for next year, so
Okay, no, that makes
I
perfect
just
sense.
wanted to call it out and make sure everybody was aware that's where it was coming from.
Thank you. Sam?
You're building level 8s that you have at each of the elementary schools. So we have one staff person at each elementary school. Is that their only job, is to support computer or Chromebook use?
I would like to say that's their only job, but they also get used for many other things.
Okay, so part of why I was asking is because then you also only list one person at each of the middle school and high school. So the follow-up question would be, do you have enough people at the middle school and the high school to support that?
No. No, we can definitely use more. Especially right now in this building, I think we are struggling the most because the population in this building has gone up by 50%. And we have a wonderful tech here, but it is a struggle. And in fact, Mr. Moore, who's sitting up there, actually comes over every afternoon to help out. So we're doing our best to cover the two buildings, which has now been made a little bit worse because we just lost our person at the high school. So
Is that something we can anticipate needing to deal with in the near
Yes.
future, if not this budget cycle?
yes, I do think that.
Could you make the argument with, it's only gonna get worse with what they're asking for?
I think it's only gonna get worse. I think the hard thing for me is that every year the number of devices goes up, and it's not just computers, it's everything. It's every security camera is now powered by our network, running over our network. It's now an IT thing, it's configured by IT, it's no longer over in maintenance. The HVAC system now is running, every device is connected across the network. The new bell system, you name it, everything is somehow connected or running on our network. You'll see later on when we talk about the network devices that we're replacing a bunch of switches, and a lot of people are like, what are you doing? Why are you buying switches? Isn't everything Wi-Fi? Well, our laptops are, but all of those other devices in the building are still running on our switches. We're still having to replace them. We're still having to update them because the power requirements for what's called power over Ethernet keep going up for devices. So it's definitely going to be an ongoing thing.
Any other questions from the board? Matt?
Go ahead and make it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nick, I'm sorry.
So it says here that you have the, which I think is a good idea, the 22 iPads for translation. I'm just kind of curious, what was like done before? If like a parent came in and English maybe wasn't their first language, what was done before? Like they come to pick up their child.
I'm
And this could be
sure that
something
people
that's
on their phone or whatever they could use at the moment. I will give what happened to me at the DMV this past week. Like everybody around was like, does somebody have the Google Translate app on their phone? And the woman behind the counter was looking at the person who had kind of a friend there with him saying, doesn't he have the app on his phone? And, you know, I think it's going to be great that we actually have that ability to work. We'll also get later in here when we talk about software, I'm very excited we have another thing that helps to address the language barrier between parents and teachers, and I'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's been a mixed bag of what they're doing. They've been, like as far as our forms, we actually have translators who physically translate each and every form out for us. So this by no means will solve it, but it will certainly help.
Is that app, since because of where they're going to be used, is that like FERPA and HIPAA compliant? So if I go in and I'm using it to communicate to the school nurse about some medical condition that my child has, are we sure that that conversation is not leaving the room? I mean, clearly it is leaving the room, right? It's being translated.
It's being translated. I honestly don't know which app. She's not using Google Translate, it's a specific one. So whatever we get will have to be EdLaw compliant. So she has not specified
But that would be a
exactly which, but
consideration,
yes,
so.
anything and everything we use here has to be EdLaw compliant. Which is for bed, but.
Matt, did you have a question or just?
Yeah, no, I have one, I feel like I should know the answer, so I apologize already.
That's okay.
So we have a good amount of equipment replacement, specifically Chromebooks. Is there any credit, recycling, replacement, anything, or is that already factored into the price?
So we used to get money back when we would recycle things, not a whole lot, because I have to be honest, when we recycle those Chromebooks, there's about nothing left on them. So I say it's a 4-year replacement cycle, but in reality, the end of life on a Chromebook tends to be more like 5 or 6 years out. And when they turn them back into us, we don't recycle them then. We actually clean and test every single Chromebook that comes back. Whatever we can get functioning to a reasonable level then goes into our loaner carts. And then once it finally hits end of life, believe it or not, my guys strip the parts from them. So one thing that we found, and I'm going to credit Ryan because he's here for figuring this out, all of our Dell Chromebooks and all of our HP Chromebooks actually use the same screen. So before we recycle those Chromebooks, we strip every screen out of them because
that makes our repair budget a lot less. So I would say by the time anything leaves here, the other thing is by law, they have to either just physically destroy the hard drive or do a Department of Defense 7-pass reformatting of the hard drive. Basically, it almost costs them money to take our stuff, and pretty much over time, that's what's happened. So it used to be that we would get a small salvage fee when we would recycle them. Now, sometimes they're asking us to pay to come take them.
I have a question. I don't think this is going to be for you to answer, but given that we have so much now on the Chromebook, are we seeing savings in other parts of the budget in terms of like textbooks or other instructional material that we used to have to pay for and now we're using the Chromebook for? Do we have a way of capturing that?
Well, I don't have it right now, but I can tell you the difference in what we used to spend in textbooks as we get ready to go to a new textbook series. Our math series goes to an online series away from textbooks. And you'll see when we get to the night of the fourth, when we do new program requests, that's a big part of like the shift. So we're gonna make in academic instruction is moving to more things like that, and away from paper and away from textbooks. But I can certainly look for what those differences are.
Okay, I'm just curious, because like, that's a big number, but I feel like that's not quite the whole picture.
Correct.
No, and you'll see in the software, like one of them is called out, because we're switching math programs, and because really it's now just a software program, you'll see it on our software budget. So I think the software budget may look bigger in some senses because we're just migrating some things over from, you'll see there's a French textbook that's online that now is showing up under my budget. So I think there are some savings behind the scenes that may be happening.
Okay, I just wondered if we had a way to sort of track that over time.
Yeah.
Are we spending more or less on instructional content? Or
I think some of them may be hard too because you physically buy the book one year and you may not have any more charges for the next couple, where a software subscription is every year, so.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, we'll open it up to the community. Are there any questions for what Julie has presented so far?
Are there security cameras?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's a separate from our system here, but yes, they do have security cameras on the buses.
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, moving onward. Okay, so next we're gonna talk a little bit about software. So when we talk about software, I usually like to go over kind of the new things from this year because sometimes that's changed from what we planned. And then there'll be a second slide that is the new stuff we have planned for 22-23. So this year, some of the things that were new, we expanded our subscription to Gizmos to include the high school and the junior high. They use it in COVID for a lot of labs that can be done electronically and remotely that normally would have been done in person hands-on. You'll notice that we have a new diagnostic testing program for math and ELA. It replaced one that we were using previously called Star 360 that was used for ELA. So you'll see the minus 23 underneath was replaced by iReady. This year we are doing it K2 through 6. I believe next year we are expanding K through 8. Somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's I'm getting nods, that's a good sign. Reflex math, in truth, we actually were paying 3 through 6 before, but when the 6th graders moved to the middle school, because their licensing is by building, now we have to actually pay for another building. It's kind of a pain. Still the same grades that we're buying, but we had to pay for another building. Nearpod was a new software that we put in this year, and next year we're going to keep it. The next slide is a little controversial. So Google Workspace. So you remember how everybody said Google was free, Google for schools was free? Well, in truth, it never ever was free. We always have been paying a device license for our Chromebooks. That used to be $24 a Chromebook, and now is $38 a Chromebook. But this is another fee that's actually per person. And in fact, if we start using up too much storage space, they'll charge us for something else. So this will be unfortunately going forward what we have to pay, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. So that is, it's called different names, so you'll see there's a name, sometimes they call it Enterprise. They've switched the names 3 times in the last 3 years. So you'll hear people call it different things. There's another version that's Teacher Plus, but it's all the same. The next line is called Virtru. So when we were talking before about personal data and making sure it's safe, this is an end-to-end encryption tool for email that allows right now it's not for everyone, it's mostly for critical people who might be sending data. So think of like your HR, payroll, special ed, nurses, registrar, people who would be sending your birth date or your social security number or things you really want secure. That's a software that allows us to encrypt it end to end. The next line is Imagina, which I talked about a second ago. That's the new French online textbook. The next one is called FabMaker Studio. It's a creative suite that allows kids to create characters and books. It's used in the innovation labs, both in the elementary and the junior high. Onshape is CAD software that we started using when it was free during COVID, and our our middle school innovation spaces wanted to continue using it this year. I'm hoping that we will get everybody back on the Autodesk suite. There's the version they can use, but they have a lot of curriculum developed already in Onshape, so we granted that for next year as well. The last line is Crowdstrike. It's going to be a little bit more expensive next year because we have some more devices on it, but it's critically important. It's a next-gen antivirus system, and over the last 2 weeks, while everything's been happening in Ukraine, it has been critically important here. It is outstanding. It is monitored 24/7, so if it sees something spreading across our network and it's Saturday night at 11:30, there's an actual person at Crowdstrike who will start to take action, and if they can't get a hold of us, they will start shutting down devices on our network to stop it from spreading, and it has been fantastic. So now we're on to new stuff for 22-23. So the first one I am also very excited about. It's Parent Square. To date, we've been using 2 things officially to send out messages to parents. One is Infinite Campus Messenger, and the other is School Messenger, which if you've ever gotten the Snow Day broadcast, that's what's been doing the broadcasting. But we've had some issues with School Messenger, and one of them is people who prefer a different language. It's been very difficult to do the translation through School Messenger. It's not great at it. They said it was going to be great, but it in practice has not been so good. So at the beginning of this year, through EdLaw, we had to kind of ratchet down what people were using, and we found out that people were using a lot of different things to communicate with students and with parents. And we have found one package that's going to do a lot of them. So just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things it's replacing, at our high school, teachers were using Remind to communicate with students via text, and also coaches. And Parent Square will actually allow us to do that safely. So if you're a teacher or a coach, you can text a student. You won't see what their phone number is. So it's all the conversations are saved, they're monitored by the system, and you don't have direct access to the student's cell phone number. But the really beautiful thing is, if I'm a student and my preferred language is Chinese, I might type in my message on my phone in Mandarin, but my coach will receive that message in English on his phone. He'll respond to it in English, and when I get the message back on my cell phone, the text, it will be Mandarin. So really powerful, really cool, works also the same way with parents. So we're really looking forward to some of those features, consolidating a lot of our communication across buildings and for students and teachers. The next, we're considering some behavior management software. It's a little bit controversial. People have different opinions on it, so we have not picked one. I know our special education department really would like something especially at the middle school level, so we're still looking at that, but I wanted to put some money aside for when those decisions are made. The next line we also kind of touched on a little earlier. This is the iReady math curriculum. This is going to replace the Go Math curriculum. It's also going to replace some other things like Happy Numbers in the K through 2 level. Securely is actually a second Chromebook web filter. We have one filter in place right now. We used to be using a product called GoGuardian for our filtering, and we started using a different product for filtering, and we love some features about it, but some of the features it's kind of missing. GoGuardian itself started out when we were buying it at $32,000. The quote for next year was $109,000, which seems a little crazy. So I like, there's an analogy that I'll have to give him credit, Mike Dowdy at BOCES uses. When you're dealing with security, nothing is perfect. There's always holes in every product that you buy, so it's kind of like stacking layers of Swiss cheese. You try and cover up the holes in a layer underneath with the second slice of Swiss cheese. So Securely is actually going to go on top of our GoGuardian shield that's already in place, as well as our firewall, to add just another layer of security on our students' Chromebooks. Because we're doing that, they also have a teacher module that will replace the remote control teacher module from GoGuardian in the classroom. Virtru is a CAD software that allows students to take their drawing and communicate that drawing to big CNC routers and 3D printers. That's something they've requested at the high school and the middle school. We're looking for a security layer, a DNS layer security. I won't get deep into that, but it is about $15,000. We're also looking for something to aggregate our logs. So the best way to describe this is we have a ton of different things that are collecting log files all day long. Firewall, every time you log into email, and this software basically monitors those logs, and when it sees weird anomalies happens, it lets you know, so that you don't have to have somebody digging through all of those logs every day to look for it. It tells you automatically when something bad is happening. That's it for software. So I'm going to stop here and pause if people have questions about software. That was a lot of that. So.
Well, that's a good question. So it seems we are pretty well set with this budget as far as protection for our system. Do you feel that's true, or?
I will tell you that cybersecurity is an ever-changing, ongoing process. And I don't think you could ever feel entirely safe. We are doing everything we know to do and following all of the recommendations of both ed law, which everybody thinks about ed law as being those contracts, but that's only 1/6 of ed law. There's a whole section of ed law about what they call the NIST framework that has a framework of all of the things that we should be working on to make sure that we keep data safe, and we are doing our very best to do that. Okay?
That's
and
all we can expect.
It's an ever-changing landscape, and we try and keep up.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Matt?
I just have a general parent square question. So is the usage strictly like what School Messenger does right now, or is there also usage for like, you know, different teachers are using different platforms and apps?
Yes, so I wish I brought my little chart. I had a little sticky that I was keeping tabs of all the different packages that prior to ed law our teachers were using that we didn't realize they were using. And the list started, let's see if I can, they were somewhere between 9 and 11. It was Remind, Balloons, Class Dojo, School Tag, Class Tag, I see School Messenger. I'm missing a couple, but the list went on. So the goal of this is to quote Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. We're going to try and have one package that will do it all, so that you're not having to load. What you don't want is the parent to go to the first open house and be asked to load 11 apps on their phone. Nobody wants that. We want to get one thing. The beauty of ParentSquare is that it allows you as the parent to pick the method of notification that you like best. So if you're the kind of person that likes a text message, you can tell it, I just want text. If you're the kind of person that wants an email, you can say, I just want email. If you just want it to notify you once a day with kind of a diary of everything that went on, that's what it will do. Now, if there's an emergency message, so let's say there was, I don't know, an early dismissal because of snow, even if you picked the diary, it would override it and just send that message right away. But it gives parents the ability to kind of tailor how they like to receive the message, as well as their preferred language to receive those messages in. So that's really important. It does do a lot of other things too, which I didn't bring up. There's like a million really cool things about ParentSquare. The first ones are the communication aspects. That's what we'll push out first. But it also has ways for us to push out permission slips for, as we were talking about earlier, the Chromebook insurance. If you wanted to pay, they have a store. You could have people pay for their, so a lot of different ways to get information out electronically and get an electronic response back.
Is there a way to let parents know what day tomorrow is? So that parents don't have to post on Facebook saying.
Oh, you mean like today is a day or a B day? So it does have a calendar. So there is a calendar, and the other thing that I really like about it is that, like, let's say your kid is in track, and your other kid is in the school play at the junior high, and one's in track at the high school. You can have a combined calendar, and it will color code the different things on the calendar, so you can have, you know, Johnny stuff in green and the play stuff is in blue. So it's very powerful.
Will it be more clear about who is sending the message? That's my biggest complaint about Infinite Campus, is I get an email from IC Communication or whatever it is, and it's not signed, and I have 3 different kids in 3 different schools who collectively have about 18 teachers.
Yes, it definitely does. It also has ability for teachers to send to like a group or a class or just individual students or teachers, and it definitely identifies the staff member. And when you look on the side of it, we'll have a whole
Set of templates or whatever.
We'll have a whole set of templates. We'll also have a whole sort of welcome to ParentSquare for parents so that they can see. But the way it's set up, there's a section on the left that kind of shows the groups that you're in, and you can kind of hide and unhide things that you want to see. You'll be able to see the overall school messages versus messages from the high school versus messages from your AP Bio class, etc. And it also allows principals to do posts. So if they want to get fancy and do, look what happened at school today, there's a section where they can post pictures of what's going on and cool things. Teachers in the classroom, as long as it's okay to post pictures of those particular students, can post a picture to just the parents in the classroom or overall. So it's very powerful, very cool. We're very excited about it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
So, right now, the school messenger, is available to non-parents, like someone like me.
Yep.
So what happens with that?
The same thing. So this is one of the other cool, well, there's 2 parts to this. Right now, I don't know if any of you as a parent or even community members have signed up for School Messenger. One thing that I don't like about it is when you sign up for the text messages, you get an initial message that says, hey, we need you to confirm, and you have to type yes, and it's to a random 6756 number, if anybody's ever gotten that. And if you didn't see that message, or you happen to decide that you didn't want messages from Target or some other vendor that happened to use the same company to send the text messages, you might accidentally unconfirm your choice and not be able to get text messages again. So we've had some weird results with that. Parent Square does not have that at all. If they're in our system in Infinite Campus, it will just automatically go out to them. They don't have to re-enroll. Community members will need to re-enroll, and we'll send information out to everybody. And much like they did with School Messenger, they'll be able to join. I think you can pick different, you can even have alumni groups and different things that they can join for specialized messages. So definitely more fully featured than what we have, and still options for the community to get those messages.
I think the big thing about it is it's far more robust, and so as Julie said, we'll start first with the school messenger kinds of messages at the highest level to make sure we get that out, but then we have vetted it with teachers so it can condense, so as parents, you're not looking at 50 different apps for all the different teachers your kids may have. It's seamless, it's easy to use for teachers, and then in addition to that, we can use it for other things, so community groups, we can use it for sports teams, and the other big thing is the real-time translation, so to be able to write to you in English, you get it in Spanish, you write back in Spanish, I get it in English, it just really will help to increase that equity of communication.
Is there a notification that that process is going on? I could foresee a circumstance where the translation screws something up and there's a very awkward problem created by it. Whereas if the coach or the teacher or the parent knows, hey, this was translated, so maybe they didn't actually mean that, and do they get a notification of that or an indication of that?
Not every time they get the message, but they will in the beginning when they sign up and they pick their language, they'll know it's being translated.
Right, but the coach doesn't know that, right? If I'm publishing my stuff to my students and it's getting translated into 4 different languages, and one of them screws it up and says something inappropriate, just because there's a nuance in the language, is the parent going to know that I mean, the parent will know that that translation is going to happen, but when the parent writes back to the coach, they don't know that that message is being translated.
I believe you can actually see when it comes back, the demos that I have seen it, you can actually see the message both ways. There's a toggle,
Okay.
so you can actually see that it was translated and
Okay.
see the non-translated versus the translated. So even the parent can see it back in English.
Okay. So that'd be something to anticipate maybe when
Yes,
you are translating.
absolutely. As someone who's been to foreign countries where Google Translate did not exactly do the best job on menus, I definitely agree, it's not the best. But it's using a higher level, so it's not just the plain old Google Translate that you would get on your phone. It has a higher level of algorithm that's doing the translation behind the scenes.
Sandy, stick with Parent Square since we're having such a good time talking about it.
Okay.
Are students part of this messaging system?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes, absolutely. So it's meant, this part, I'm excited, is meant to replace some of the other things like Remind that teachers were using before Ed Law to communicate with students.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I have two, I'll try to form a question out of this. If this, how many of our students, like percentage-wise roughly, do, 90% of our students have cell phones and teachers are able to communicate with them via text message?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a high percentage.
It's a very high
Very
percentage.
high percentage, okay, that's good to know.
They'll still be able to get it via email as well, and via, there's an app. So much like a
So they'll
parent,
see it maybe on their Chromebook?
yes, so
Okay.
much like a parent, they can choose the modality that they would like to receive their communications in. So exactly like the parents, if they don't have a phone or don't want it on the data on their phone, they can say, just send me email on my Chromebook.
Okay, and that's what the student can get.
Absolutely, the same message will come to them in an email on their Chromebook.
Okay, so, and I guess I didn't realize there was this proliferation, my kids been out of school for a while, this proliferation of communication apps that teachers are using, so.
They aren't anymore, but they were. This
They
is part
aren't
of the,
anymore.
yes, this is part
Okay.
of the good
This is
things
being
about
shut
our law
down?
is that, yes.
Already, okay, good, because my follow-up question or statement was, teachers have a tendency to get comfortable with whatever they're using and not
They do.
like the change, so I just wanted to make sure that we have the ability to migrate everybody to this platform and make sure that the proliferation is completely shut down.
Yes.
We really have to, because a lot of those apps were initially free and were free, but then because of that, they didn't meet the compliance features of Ed Law 2D, and nor would the companies do it that way. So some of the teachers had to go through that this year when we're like, we can't use them anymore. We can't get, companies wouldn't sign agreements with them. If they're not gonna sign the agreements with us, we can't by law use them. So we had to phase some of them out right away.
Yeah, so the reason we found out about a lot of these is we turned off the sign on with Google button for anything other than only the very few apps that we have Ed Law agreements for. And that's when all of a sudden we're like, whoa, wait, somebody was using that? Wait, what? So it was good. So
Okay, that is
there are
good.
some really good parts about Ed Law. I mean, there are some painful parts that make our lives a little bit miserable with Ed Law, but it really is a good thing, and it really is out there to protect our students' data.
That's good, comforting, thank you.
I'll ask one more parent square question. Does it integrate with Google Classroom as well? So that would be, I get all of my communication through that, or am I gonna still get my weekly updates for my kids?
It does integrate. You may still get some through Google Classroom, but I think you're gonna be able to control that a little bit more.
Okay.
And I think once that's the uniform, method of communication, I think most people would choose to use that. I would assume if you turn your diary on that you want to get the Google Classroom updates, you could still get them that way. But I think most teachers will use that as a format of communication.
Any other questions? This is your last one.
Well, I have two more, I better make it count.
I just want to know that it's not just me making this night last longer.
It's always me.
Kidding.
Just kidding.
So Google Classroom, they're starting to, or Google is starting to find other ways to charge us.
Absolutely.
Are there competitors to Google yet? I mean, I would assume it would be a massive amount of work to shift off of Google, but at what point do we start needing to look at that?
There are definitely other players, as there always have been. Microsoft is definitely making a big play to try and get schools back. They have several devices now that run kind of a pared down version of Windows, and we're actually purchasing one just to kind of kick the tires on it and see. So that's always in the background. The problem is there's such a an amount of stuff everybody has already done their curriculum, done their Google Classroom, that it would be a big lift to change to something else at this point.
But we do sort of keep an eye on, at some point, it could become worth doing that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, truthfully, the cost of this is not prohibitive at this point, but it could be. I mean, if you look at GoGuardian and what happened, like, who would have thought GoGuardian would go from 32,000 to 109,000? Like, that's crazy. So, if something like that were to happen, we would certainly start looking at other things. Absolutely.
That'll be my next question, is probably more for Ms. Steels or maybe Mr. Deneen. Are we careful when we develop curriculum and lesson plans and things like that, that we're not targeting a specific platform, so that when something like this comes up, not that it's happening this year, but if Google comes back next year and says, okay, that's gonna be $10 million, then we don't wanna lose, 5 years worth of.
Right. No, we don't target a specific platform, but we do have 500 plus teachers who now use this seamlessly. So I think we have to look at $30,000 expenditure versus having to train everybody on something brand new. And I don't see Microsoft as being forward thinking. So I don't know what the next thing is out there, but I would say I would have to look at, over the last several years, teachers have made such an investment to go to the Google suite of tools that to turn that around would be a big shift to turn, I would say.
Well, I mean, $30,000 is,
Right.
it's not nothing, but
Right,
it's a drop in the bucket comparatively.
Yeah.
But at some point, there must be some number at which it becomes a problem, and it would be better if it were easier to deal with when it becomes a problem.
The problem is it's not just the software, it's the hardware itself. It would have to be something cloud-based, and because we're still stuck with the Chromebooks. I mean, you could not replace, 6,000 to 7,000 to 8,000 Chromebooks in a year. That would be a hard pill to swallow, so.
Okay, we're gonna open it up to the community. Carrie?
I've got two questions. about the parent square, is that going to start in the fall? Or when will that take place? Just so parents know when to expect that it's gonna go to one communication platform, which, as a parent, that is awesome.
I would anticipate that the bulk of the bells and whistles will happen in the fall. We are hoping to get at least the emergency messenger portion and perhaps the two-way communication portion to happen now. If we are able to do that now, we will continue to also send school messenger messages, because I really want to make sure that nobody misses a message. So they'll have to be parallel for a little bit until we get people transitioned over, but the hope is to tell people, hey, by the end of the year, we're gonna switch over to the other.
So will that mean that Infinite Campus will become obsolete, or is that still something
No,
that we
we
would
would
use?
still have Infinite Campus, your grades are still gonna be in Infinite
Okay.
Campus.
But it's just not gonna be used as communication.
It's just not gonna be the primary method of communication anymore. We're going to encourage people to all use the one method.
Awesome. My second question is on that behavior management software. In regards, so it's for elementary and special ed, so what exactly is that? I mean, I don't wanna get like crazy in depth, but as a special ed parent, I'm
Think
just
of
curious.
when your children were in kindergarten and someday, I don't know, my child's kindergarten, we got a green light or a red light or a yellow light for the day. There are some things like that where students might get somebody correct me if I'm wrong, in Class Dojo, I think you get monster badges for good behavior, you get rewards for your good behavior. And it's a tool that they use.
So is it just for like the teachers to use, and it's not a communication outside of?
It also uses the communication between school and home. It's been a vehicle with some parents in classrooms.
Some of it's used for self-regulation throughout the day, and also it does communicate with parents, so you kind of see a visual schedule of students' day, so it's been used in different ways. What we're trying to balance right now is there's really, it's down to two, so we're trying to look at which one really serves both our middle school students and our elementary students, because that's primarily the two places that they're used. So we really have it down to two different tools that we're trying to see what fits best for our teachers and families and students.
We actually were trying to get that all into one. Parent Square does not have that feature yet. There's another package called Gleams that did, but it's other features that Parent Square does weren't as good as Parent Square, so this had the most features that we wanted combined into one.
I have a question on that. So many times special education parents are asked by outside service providers that they may be working with for aggregate data of behavior to help with outside of therapy or whatever, in addition to what the school is doing. So is this something where like that you're talking about the daily part, but is there something that then can help with those types of requests that parents would have to help with outside services?
Yeah, I don't see those two management tools being that source of data to send to clinicians and so on. I see that more being methods of data collection using Google Forms, those kind of pieces that can then be shared with outside therapists. So I don't see those two tools as being the best option for application.
Thank you, Harry. Any other questions? Okay, Julie.
Oh, wait, one more.
Sorry. Monica.
My question was actually about iReady, but it really would be applicable to all the other programs. Was just recently my son was evaluated using the iReady. I have some close friends of mine that their expertise is special education, utilizing that program. So I kind of came at the specialist for my son that's at this school with like both guns, like the barrels are fully loaded. I had a ton of questions and knew exactly what I was talking about. So I wanted to know that through the iReady, there's actually quite a lot that you can do within that program. You can actually set up parent accounts and go into it, and there's whole educational plans that your son or daughter can then do like fun game games and quizzes, and they can actually constantly be evaluated to show progress. There's a lot you can do within that program. But when I asked my son's specialist about that, he was not aware of any of that. He was like, he actually told me, because I have to admit, it's a brand new program. We haven't had, we haven't spent a lot of time with it. So my question was about what training, if there's training included in that fee, are our teachers and stuff going to be given tools so that I think they're familiar with all that program offers?
I'll just quickly tell you that we used it this year as just the diagnostic tool. We have had training that iReady has included. We just had one, again, maybe that was our second or third for the year. But we also did not invest in the entire spectrum of services for iReady, although there are plenty in what we did purchase, but primarily to get off the ground this year for literacy and for math, we invested in diagnostic tool, which also then comes with lesson arts and or, relevant targeted content.
So is there a plan to expand that, to get the full, I just figured if we're gonna have
It's part of the conversation. We did pilot a couple pieces in a grade level or two.
all right.
And there'll be additional training when we bring in the full curriculum for math next year too. So the teachers are coming on board with that, which will be far more expensive than what we did this year.
Okay, great, because it sounds like an amazing program, if we fully utilize it, so I hope if we're making these investments that we do fully utilize them. And that goes for everything, like the rest of these new programs that we're talking about, I assume there's training involved with those, and that staff will get the opportunity to learn about that.
Thank you, Monica. Any other questions?
Okay, we're gonna blaze forward here to network infrastructure. All right, I'm gonna preface this by, there is a giant spreadsheet filled with nitty-gritty details about the switches down to the power supplies that are in them. And if you want to know about that, please come see me probably afterwards. I'd be more than happy to show you all the nitty-gritty details about our network stuff. I'm gonna kind of stay up here, kind of categorize and group them together, and we'll just try and go quickly kind of through the list. So the switches are across all of our schools. Those are replacements. Correct me if I'm wrong, we had about a 7-year replacement cycle for those. Next line is UPS battery backups. So these are the things that give power in our network closets in case we have a power outage. Some of them actually need to be fully replaced. Some of them just need their battery replaced. That totals about $32,000. Next is a really big one this year, a lot bigger than in years past. That's the wireless access points. Most of those are going in the high school. So we are switching from Cisco over to Aruba, and they don't really coexist in a building together very well. So we need to do the whole building at once. And we have done all the other buildings since the last one left. So it's because it's just physically a much bigger building, it's a much bigger number. So that is why that number this year is so much higher. As we do each year, we have one fiber run that's being replaced between closets. We have a number of servers that are going to be on the replacement cycle this year. We have some storage, so it's a big storage unit that we're adding some storage to. It's not ready to be replaced this year, but we need some more space, so we've allotted some money for that. The next line is part of that equity piece that we saw in the very beginning. This is Wi-Fi hotspots for our students and a few staff members who do not have internet at home. We actually own the hotspots themselves, but this is actually the service piece that we pay for. And I just will point out that we buy that service through BOE, so we do get aid on that the following year. We are doing an upgrade to our phone system this summer. That'll be about a little over 16 and a half. And every time we replace out the switches on the top, we end up replacing out the patch cables going to them to modernize them to whatever is the latest and greatest, which right now we're using Cat 6. And the last line is a new Fluke tool to do network testing of the lines. And we have already applied for E-rate aid on all of that, and it will take a while to get approved, but it's already in process. In fact, we signed up today. So that's about 50% that we'll give back the following year. And almost everything else that wasn't E-ratable, we will purchase through BOCES, and we'll get also about 50% aid the following year on that. So those are the estimated aid on the bottom. I'm gonna stop because I think that's my last one on network. Yes. Anybody have questions on network stuff? Waiting
The board obviously does not. Does the community have any questions?
No? All right, we waited the mandatory 23 seconds. I think we're good. Okay, moving on. This is a quick one, I promise. Non-public hardware. So this is hardware that we technically loan to the non-public schools located in our district. For those of you who don't know who those are, that's St. Gregory, St. Pius, St. Ambrose, and Loudonville Christian. The amount is calculated based on their enrollment on Bed's Day of last year, and there's a formula the state provides us. And generally we loan it, but unless they went belly up, we're never gonna see it again. They keep it.
Quick one on that. So it's St. Ambrose, their change next year won't matter for this budget, would be for next year's budget.
Say that again.
So
I'm not sure what they're changing.
Catechized moving over to,
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
so it's gonna become a high school now as well.
So
But it won't
the
affect this.
enrollment will be,
It won't
it's
become
just an
next year's
estimate,
budget.
and the enrollment will be whatever their Bed's Day was enrollment for October of this year will be what's used
So next
next
year,
year. So
it'll
the
be
following year, it will be affected, yes. Anybody else? All right, we're moving forward. IT equipment, also an easy one. This has been the same, I think, the entire time I have been here. It's equipment that is not aidable. So, examples of this, my laptop, because I'm not an instructional person, is considered. The touch board at central office where we normally have this in the training room, that would be considered IT equipment. So a wide variety of things, some break fix items. It's been at $80,000 every year. All right, next one is an interesting one. So we're gonna talk a little bit about security cameras. So when we first started our building project, we planned to replace the security cameras in every building for a wide variety of reasons that we won't get into today. The cameras themselves for the elementary schools and 3 other buildings, central office, the maintenance facility, and the transportation facility, were pulled out of the building project. The wiring for them was done, I think all except for maybe the transportation facility, the maintenance facility, and central office. Keith, you correct me on that if I'm wrong. But the cameras themselves weren't covered. We do desperately need those cameras to be put in place. But I was able to find a way for us to get some aid. So there is a COSER that I found at BOCES that we can purchase these under, which means we will get 50% back in aid the following year. And that's all we have to say about that. Does anybody have any questions about the cameras themselves?
Where do we store the footage for the cameras? I mean, presumably that's a lot of data.
It is a lot of data.
Paying a subscription on top of the cost of installing?
No, we actually have DVRs in every school,
Okay.
as well as at the Heights and the ones at the high school. I don't want to say publicly how many days worth of data for obvious reasons that we store, but we do have a history of data, as well as the ability to lock any video. Like, let's say there was an incident today at the middle school and you wanted to make sure we held the video for that incident forever, you can put a lock on that segment of video and it will just keep it indefinitely.
Is that equipment also on a changeover cycle, like we're gonna have to rebuy it every so many years? Do we have a budget line for that?
No, not yet.
And that's just because we don't really have it yet, or?
It's just because it's pretty far out.
Okay.
At this point, we don't even have.
Okay, we don't have the equipment.
We don't even
yet.
have this,
Okay.
so. And it just came in the building project, the other 2 buildings. So the high school cameras were literally just installed.
Okay.
So let's hope we aren't replacing them anytime soon.
Any questions from our community?
Yeah, moving on. So I purposely put this slide right after the security cameras, because I think once we talk about this a little bit, there may be some questions kind of between the two of them. So I'm not gonna go deep into smart schools because you hear me talk about it every time, but we do have about $541,000 left in that fund. It doesn't expire, so we can use it at any time. The biggest challenges to using that money, the biggest challenge is time. The prior 2 times that we used Smart Schools Bond Act money, the application process took approximately 9 months to go through. And I was curious, I thought, well, after COVID, a lot of schools use that money to buy their Chromebooks. Like, I would think that the Smart Schools people probably don't have a lot to do now. However, so I emailed them about a month ago, and I got an auto reply from all of the email boxes that I sent to that basically said, I'm so sorry, we are no longer monitoring this mailbox on a daily basis. Kind of, we'll get back to you when we get back to you. And that was a month ago. So I'm not particularly encouraged about the length of time it would take us to do a smart school application. So I think where the cameras, in my mind, and we talked about this in other years, would have been a really good opportunity to use smart schools money, because that money isn't shareable with our non-publics in that category. Unfortunately, right now, there is a 6-month lead time on the cameras to order them. Just if we were to place the order, not on Smart Schools today for the cameras, they are not showing up until September. If we add a 9-month window, which now seems like it might even be a year window, that's a 1.5 years away for us. 15 months, 18 months, and we just cannot wait for those cameras that long. So I think what I would recommend at this point is we look to use that money for some items that we can plan ahead for, maybe some of the LCD touch panels that are very expensive that I know in talking to Mr. Deneen that we might want in some of the SPED classrooms, some things that we could plan enough in advance that we could get our application in, and it wouldn't be the end of the world if it didn't show up right away.
So we're gonna get started on that soon, then, right?
Yes.
Maybe.
Well, and you know, honestly, maybe they will catch up after from the COVID rush, and it will be back to normal again.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, they had so many schools that use their money towards COVID Chromebooks.
But even pre-COVID, there was a long lead time.
It was
correct?
9 months, yeah.
Would those be considered, I don't remember what the distinction is, instructional technology where we have to share it with the non-public schools?
So different categories are treated in different ways. So if you buy regular instructional tech, like a Chromebook, because of our enrollment numbers, it's about 20% of that money we would have to share with the non-public schools. When we initially did our very first one, we were lucky. We were one of the first plans to do network, and about 4 months after we had our plan approved, they changed their mind, and where our plan network wasn't shareable and we didn't have to share any of that money, after that, it was shareable. And in fact, they went back and kind of grandfathered, gave us a little extra money for those non-publics to kind of cover what we would have shared with them and didn't. So we actually benefited by getting our plan in early on that. But that one isn't shareable. I believe the security cameras are ones that's not shareable with them. And other categories are things that I really hope we don't ever have to do. I think it's creating more space if you had classes in trailers in your parking lot. And there might have been something though for pre-K, I'm not sure. I'll have to go look back at that, but there's 6
LCD monitors for classrooms.
we would have to share with them. Yep. 20% of that we would have to share with the non-pubs.
Well, thank you, Julie.
Okay, I think that's it. That's all I got.
Okay, well, I know Kathy probably wants to wrap it up with the schedule to come or
Yes, and
questions?
I've been monitoring with our communications team, so there aren't any questions coming in from the live stream, so we are good there. So Julie, thank you very much for that overview. So you can see, next week we have our monthly board meeting, so that's why there is the gap in between. So we come back on April 4th with new programs, initiatives, and the federal grant funding. That is all the COVID relief funds that we'll talk about. On April 6th, we'll go to anticipated building enrollment and staffing. And then we move to the proposed budget review, the tax cap, property tax report card, and the approval of schedules on April 11th, and that is when the board will formally adopt the proposed budget. And then we jump to May 4th, which will be a public forum on the budget and also meet the candidates for the Board of Education. And then, of course, we lead up to May 17th, 2022, which will be our annual election and budget vote at the Goodrich Building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Julie, and thank you, and Sam, I was only kidding about that. As long as we got out of here before the kids showed up. That's really my only concern.
Thank you, Julie. You and the department do a phenomenal job for us, and we are so appreciative of all your good work during COVID times and during these continuing COVID times. So thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Skills.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Nardolillo. I'll take a motion to return to the regular session and adjourn. Mrs. Pangburn, and Ms. Grinnell, and all in favor. Thank you very much.